Hi guys, it's Billy and we are on to lesson 1. I hope you enjoyed this video. I am going to let you know for the first several videos that I've never made videos before, but because everybody asked me, how do you crochet? Can you teach me to crochet? I've decided to go ahead and try my hand and at least helping you guys learn the beginning of the crochet and maybe more through some advanced stitches and stuff so you can make some much larger projects. But because I've never made videos before, don't have a lot of experience with it, so if you guys want to leave me comments and tell me how I can improve and what you would like to see, or maybe if you have a project you're working on or a stitch that you're stuck on and you need help, just please let me know. I will let you know that I'm a really busy person. I have kids and grandkids and I work a lot and do a bunch of overtime, so it may take me a little bit to get back to you, but I will try to respond to everybody if I can. So if you have any questions or any comments on how I can make my videos better, please let me know. And with that, we're on to lesson 1, and what we're going to talk about is what do you have to crochet a project, and that is a very simple question. Thing number 1 is you have to have some yarn. Oops. You have to have some yarn. You can buy this at Walmart, you can go to Michael's, you can go to Hobby Lobby, any place that you can find a skeiny yarn. That's thing number 1 that you have to have. Thing number 2 that you have to have is you have to have a crochet hook. And that's it. Now, it is helpful if you actually own a pair of scissors to cut the yarn when you're helpful, although I know a lot of people that really just kind of grab it and break it off instead of cutting it. I don't prefer to do that because it leaves a real messy end and it's harder to weave in. But really, to be honest with you, you need a hook. You can get these at Walmart for like $1 or something, and your yarn, depending on where you get it from and the brand that you buy, the texture of it, the whole 9 yards, they will run you anywhere from about $2 all the way up to, you can spend $10 or $15 for a skinny yarn. I've seen some in specialty yarn stores for as much as $50. I am kind of lazy, so I live right up the street from Walmart, so I tend to get a lot of my yarn at Walmart. If I can't find it there, I'll go to Michael's or I'll go to Hobby Lobby. On rare occasions, if I want to splurge, then I do go to an actual yarn store, which is a lot more expensive, but they have some really nice imported yarns like alpacas and wools and all kinds of stuff that's really cool. But for a beginner, I would just say take your $5, go down to Walmart, grab you a color that you like, buy you a hook that you like, and we'll talk about what size to get to go with the yarn that you have. But this is all that you have to have. Okay, so for right now, we're just going to go through some of the other items that you can have that are really helpful. So we're going to put down a hook and we're going to put down the yarn, and we're going to take a look at some other things that people used to crochet with, things that you may want to buy or you may not want to buy. Some of the things that are most helpful is, of course, you have your yarn, you have your hook, and you'll want a pair of scissors to cut your yarn with. I tend to keep several pairs of scissors. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to show you my yarn box, or my crochet box I should say. This is it. Everything that I have to crochet with fits in this little box. And I have duplicates and I've got triplicates of things and things that I've tried, things that I bought because I thought I would like them and then I didn't like them and they go into the box. And I shared this box with my daughter and my granddaughter who crochet, so they come in and dig through here. But we're going to go through some of the items in this box. As you can see, there's not a whole lot they're crocheting. It's mostly just time and patience and a creative imagination. So let's see what's in my little magic crochet box over here. Okay. Like I said, I have a set of hooks. Hooks come in all different sizes. You can get it to crochet yarn as thin as a thread for when you make really elegant doilies and decorative table displays, all the way up to making hoods and jackets and the whole 9 yards. This is actually a full set of crochet hooks. Well, I don't have some of the larger sizes in here, but these over here are some of the very small ones, but I don't have the extra large sizes in here. I do have some, I just don't generally crochet with anything that big. But this is a full set. I would say that I wouldn't go out and buy every one of these right away because a lot of them you will hardly ever use. Like this set over here, this is for crochet, and I'm going to hold these up and show you, let me grab one of them out, how tiny that crochet, if you can see that, how tiny that end is on there. And that's for doing crochet with yarn that's like the size of a thread, or just a little bit thicker. I'm never really going to use these. These are some of the ones that I inherited from my mother, where she did everything under the sun. I mostly stick to clothing, blankets, hats, stuff like that. So I tend to use hooks on this side to go with the yarn that I buy. So we'll go over those, but I just want to show you what a full set of crochet hooks look like. The next thing that you're going to need, or that I find very valuable, is you have what we call a darning needle. It looks like a sewing needle, it's just a little bit bigger, and if you notice right up here, it's got a wider opening so that you can stick the thicker yarns through there. Some people are really good at just folding the yarn and pushing it on there. They'll do this really fancy thing where they go like this and then they flatten it out and they shove it through there. I'm not good at that. So what I did was I went and spent like $1.50 at the store, and I got me what is called a threader. If you can see this little wire up here, this is for when you're like sewing and you have just a single thread. Or if you notice on the ends here, you have one for smaller yarns and one for thicker yarns. And what you actually do is you take your end, you slide it through your hole, and then you clip your thread on it like that, and then you just hold it and you pull it through to where you have one. That way your yarn is threaded. Now, I know this isn't a sewing lesson, but this is going to be part of the things that you're going to need to do, at least on your projects at the beginning and at the end. We'll visit some techniques on how you're not going to have to do so much of this, because this is my least favorite part. I generally bribe my daughter with something very nice to go sew in all the little ends that I missed. But we're going to teach you how to have not so many ends to sew in, so when your project is done, you're almost at the very end and you don't have to spend hours sewing in all these little ends that you're stuck with when you do your color changes. But I did want to tell you that this is something that is very handy to have. You don't have to have it, but if you get the chance, I would pick one up because they're really nice. So this is just a darning, what they call a darning needle. And you'll see them in the section where the crochet hooks are. And then this is just a threader for needles and yarns and stuff like this. These will all be in your craft section, like even at Walmart or anything like that. You should see these because they should have them all together. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is a tape measure. Generally we all have these. Do I use it that often? Not really. But when you have to have it to do certain items, like when you're making beanies and you need to know the length, or if you're making skirts, or like my daughter, my granddaughter, she doesn't live with me, so I call up her mom and I have her mom measure, you know, when I'm making her shorts or pants or hats and stuff like that. So this is really handy. Again, you don't have to have it if you measure things against you or you measure things against your children, but again, it is handy, so it's a tape measure. The next thing that I want to talk about are these two things. This is my daughter's and this is mine. What these are called is stitch counters or row counters. Okay, now my daughter prefers this kind. Okay, as you can see, it just has the two little numbers here. Okay, and when, oh, my camera's going out of focus, it doesn't like me moving. But if you notice, you can set these to 0. Okay, and then we'll set that one to 0. And then what happens, oh, let me make sure. I should actually have my reading glasses on, which I don't. Okay, we've got it set to 0. And every time you finish a row from a pattern, which we're going to go over later, you click one. Okay, now you know you're on row 2. When you finish row 2, you click it again to let you know that you're on row 3, row 4, row 5, and so on. And this way, when you're in the middle of a project and your kids come up, or you got to stop and make dinner, you got to go to work, or whatnot, and you come back to your project, especially on some of the tighter stitches, it's really hard to tell which row you're on. So this is really handy, okay? And this is my daughter. She likes them really simple. She doesn't do anything really extravagant like I do, or more extravagant. I won't say like the most extravagant, but I do more complicated projects than she does. So for her simple ones like counting beanies, hats, blankets, and whatnot, this is just fine. She counts through rows, it goes up to 99, and then she resets it when she's done. Mine is a little bit more fancy. It was a little bit more expensive, and you can't really see it, but I got this at Michael's, and I can't remember how much it was. It's like $10 or $15 or something. But if you notice, it has all these buttons and it's digital, and what it allows me to do is not only keep track of the rows that I do, I just click a button, click the up button here, and you can see the number advanced on there, 10, 11, 12. I'm not using it for a project right now, so that's fine. But you can go ahead and click your rows. But something you can't see, but right over here, it allows you to keep track of 3 things at once. So if I have 3 different projects, which isn't normally something that I do, I usually try to stick to one project at a time, but sometimes I'll have more than one project going. So it lets me keep track of 3 projects at once, or it'll allow me to keep track of 2 different sections. Like some of the blankets that I do, it'll say crochet this section for so many rows, then crochet this one for so many rows, then do the first one again, and then go back to the second one. So then I can keep track on here how many times I've done each one without having to erase it, and then remember that, you know, this one said do 4, this one said do 5. I can just keep going back and forth. Or if I have to keep track of how many rows that I'm doing in a line, this will let me do that. I'm not sure that I'm explaining it too well, but I'm trying. So yeah, but this lets me keep track of 3 things at once. I can keep track of multiple rows, multiple projects, stuff like that. And I actually love this thing. I would be very sad without it. But there are a lot of projects that you don't need this for, because the patterns are straight through, and a lot of people keep track of the lines better than I do, and they're better at counting. It just depends on what you're making. So with that said, the last thing that I want to talk about is what we call stitch markers. Okay, so what a stitch marker is there's different ways that you can crochet. You can crochet in straight lines, you can crochet in circles, like when you make hats and beanies. And sometimes when you do that, they'll tell you to crochet in the round, which means you're crocheting in a continuous circle. Okay, when you make a hat or something like that. Well, when you do that and you get to the end and you're continuing to go around, you still need to know how many rows you are, so you need some way to mark the beginning of each row. So this is what these are. They look like little diaper pins, but they're called stitch markers. Okay, and so what you do is you would take your project, you clip it on your thread, or I'm sorry, on your yarn, and then you close it. Okay, and then it's on your stitch, and you know where your beginning is, you know where your end is. Or if it tells you to go over so many, you can clip it on there so that you count. I have the tendency to also use these not only when I stitch in the round, but if I'm making a large blanket and there is 200, 300 stitches in a line, and I need to stop every now and then count and make sure that I'm consistent and that I haven't missed any stitches, and that I'm keeping the exact same amount in each row, so that way I don't end up with a blanket that's a pyramid or going out. What I will do, instead of trying to count 200 or 300 over, I'll count 50, put a stitch marker. Count another 50, put a stitch marker. Then I know I have 50 stitches and 50 stitches and 50, instead of trying to count all the way to 200, because if your phone rings, if your kids come in, you know, if your husband decides he wants dinner and you're in the middle of counting and you're like 125, 126, 127, and then the commotion happens, that means you got to start all the way back over from 1 and try to get through the 200 or 300 that you had. So these I like to use when I count out how many stitches are in a long thing, something like I said, like a blanket, or what they call an afghan. Okay, now we're going to talk about these really quick, because there's a couple different kinds that you can have. is you can see these tiny ones. They're really nice to have when you have smaller projects. And I buy these like 50 or 100 at a time. And the reason that I do that, and I'm going to show you the difference in between the stitch markers that you have. The reason that I buy these 50 or 100 at a time is these are really hard plastic, and if you notice, oh my lord, this one is not going to do it. This one is going to stick where it is. Let me see if I can grab another one. I'm so sorry about that. Let me see this one. Okay, here's another one. They come in multicolors. That's just the way that they are. But generally, after you use them 2 or 3 times, they tend, well, now it's not going to happen. I'm so sorry about that. But what happens is they tend to break right here. Okay? And when you're crocheting, you're clipping them, like I said, like a diaper pin, and then you have to unclip them, and then you clip them again. Well, these being a very hard plastic, they tend to break really easy. So I love them for the size that they are. I don't like the fact that when I'm crocheting and I go to take it off and move it, that it snaps. And we actually, let me see if I can grab a bunch of them. If you can see here, I have all kinds of them in all different multicolors, because some are better made than others, and some tend to just snap right away. It's not really that you're overusing them or that you're doing, it's just that I get them off of Amazon, and for like 50 cents or $1, I can buy 50 or 100 of them with no problem at all. It's just that they tend to break. So I love the size. I don't love the hard plastic because they will break on you, and you're going to want to make sure that if you're counting on these, that you have plenty to work with. So that brings me to, let me bring up another, what we call another stitch marker. If you notice that this one is just like the smaller one, only it's a little bit bigger. And the thing that I love about these are a soft plastic. So no matter how many times I hook it and unhook it and move it, I've never had one of these break on me, which I love. The thing that I don't love is how large they are, which is probably one of the reasons why they don't break. And the thing is when you're crocheting, they can tend to get in the way, and they kind of flop around and stuff like that. And they have the tendency to get snagged easier than the smaller ones do if you're moving around a lot. So while I love these, and these are the ones that I use the most of, I constantly use this if I have to have anything. I do use these because they don't break, and they open wide enough that they don't get stuck. And whereas the little hard plastic ones, because they're such hard plastic, they tend to get snagged in the yarn. So these are a smoother plastic. They are a little bit more expensive, but we're talking about, I spend maybe $1 or $2 for like 12 versus spending $1 or $2 and getting 50 or 100 that are going to break on me. I've had these ones forever, and I've never had one break. So these are my favorites. You can buy whatever you like. I'm going to actually show you a couple more that we tried and tested and let you know how those work out for us. Okay, so this one, I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to hold it up here. This one is actually a loose piece of plastic, and it makes a circle. And right here on the end, if you can see it, there's a little nub right here. Let me turn this around. There's a little nub here, and then on this side over here, there's a little hole. And what you actually do is you stick this through your yarn, through your stitch, and then you put that little nub in your hole. And this is one of the reasons why I don't use these. One is they are, as you can see, they are extremely, extremely soft, which some people like. So the problem that I have is, one, once you get it into your stitch, which can be kind of difficult if you have a stiffer yarn because you haven't washed it yet, it's hard to get it in between the stitches because it tends to break. The second thing is trying to get that little nub in this tiny little hole. Now maybe it's my fingers or maybe it's me, but me and my daughter did not care for these. And they tend to come undone, which can be a huge disaster when you're crocheting in the round, because you can't tell where the beginning and the end is, and you rely on these to stay in place. So if that little nub comes out of that little hole and it falls out, then you're kind of lost, because you have no idea if you've lost count of your rows, and you can't tell where the beginning and the end is. So these, we tried them. They were not my favorite. Some people do like them because they're easy, and some people are better at getting them to snap together, but these were not my favorites. This is just another style that you can get. I don't believe I have any of the other ones. I think we gave those away. They were just a round piece of plastic that makes like a swirl, and people use those as well. Those were not my favorite, so we gave those away to somebody who did like them. The problem with the swirls, or the same problem that I have with these little plastic ones, is they tend to come undone when I'm moving my blanket around or my project, or the swirl would tend to come out. But it's similar to these, only they don't have a little snap together. You just slide it through and it swirls, and some people like them. Were not my favorite. Now, again, we were talking about things that you have to have versus things that you just like to have. All the stitch markers and stuff, you don't really have to have those. I just prefer to have them. What you can use if you don't have a stitch marker, simple piece of yarn. I would make it contrasting to what your yarn is, so that it actually stands out. But I know so many people, when it's time to mark a stitch, they just stick a piece of yarn in there and leave it there, and then when they're done, they take it on out. So you don't have to have stitch markers. Again, those are my personal favorites, are the bigger stitch markers like this. But a lot of people just use a piece of yarn, so this is one of those things that, again, you don't have to have, but it is nice if you do have them. Again, they're not very expensive. And to be honest with you, we have gone through everything that I used to crochet with. There are a couple other things depending on what kind of crochet you do. There's different hooks, different needle, or different hooks that you can buy. There's different types of crochet you can do. There's a Tunisian crochet, there's regular crochet. We may visit the Tunisian later, but it is not one of my strong points. But you can look up videos on YouTube on it. Make some beautiful stuff. It's just not something that I personally have got caught up in doing, or that I really enjoy doing. So with that said, that is all that you have to have, or all that you should need. So we're going to look over really quick one more thing, well, not one more thing, but something to add on to the end of this video. I know it's kind of long, I'm trying to keep it short, but if you have any questions, because this one is the get to know you video of what you have to have, what you have to need, and then of course you get to meet me, yay. But I do want to make sure that I cover everything. So the thing that I am going to talk about really quick before we end this video is we're going to talk about hooks, and we're going to talk about the yarn, so that when you go to the store, you know what you want to get, you know what you're going to need, and you can buy what you need and what you want all in one trip, and you don't have to watch like 10 videos to describe one item. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about are the crochet hooks. Okay, now crochet hook is simply that. It's just they come in metal, they come in plastic, they come in wood, they come in, you know, a different type. I actually have all of the metal ones. I do have a set of plastic somewhere, but I've never used them. Some people like them because they're light. These are actually very light anyway. So, and then there's some that if you have problems with your like arthritis or pains in your wrist or your fingers, or you find your hands getting tired, they have ones with bigger ends on them so that they're easier to grip. I've always used these, and so this is what I use. So what we're going to look at on here is the different sizes of hooks, depending on if you're in the UK or if you're in the United States. I happen to be in the United States, so we're going to visit everything United States. I'm not good at conversions and all of that stuff, so, but if you have questions, let me know. I'm sure we can get through it. But what I want to talk about is the different sizes here. When you look at this hook here, I don't know that my camera will go that small, but if you look here, there's going to be a letter and a size on here, okay? One is going to have the company name of the hook, the other one's going to have the size of the hook, and it's going to have it in two different forms. It's going to have it in millimeters, so you'll have like a 5mm hook, or you're going to have like a H hook, a J hook, an I hook. I tend to use H, I's, J's, and K's a lot. So those are the ones that I always have laying out and handy. But if you look at your hook right here on there, that's generally where it'll tell you. Depending on where you get your hook from, sometimes they have them on the end, but most common you're going to find it right here. So you look for your sizes here, and depending on where you get them from, the numbers may vary from the letters a little bit. It will make a difference, but it's not going to make that much of a difference. That's something that we can talk about later when we go to gauge yarn and see what size project you want. We'll talk about that more, but right now I just wanted to tell you that the size of the hook is right here. And the reason that you're going to need to know that is because when you pick up your yarn here, you have different textures, of course, different colors, the whole 9 yards. This is some the Red Heart Soft, which I love because that's what it is. It's very soft. But I use this, and I use Caron yarn. I use all different types. Something that's really important to know, look at your pattern before you go buy your yarn, and make sure that you buy enough yarn, if at all possible, buy enough yarn for the whole project all at one time. The reason being is I had a mishap the other day where I started a cowl for somebody, which is a hood with a scarf, and it's all in one. And the problem was that I had made one, and then somebody had seen it, and they're like, oh my goodness, that is so beautiful. Can you make me one of the same colors? I looked at the yarn, and I said, I got enough yarn. I'll go ahead and I'll make you one. Well, I got through it, and I didn't have enough yarn. So I ran up to Walmart where I had bought the original yarn, grabbed a couple more skeins of the same color. It had the coloring here. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Come home, and the colors did not match. They were completely different. And we're going to talk about that right now, about your color matching, okay? So when you buy yarn, they dye the yarn the color that it's going to be, and they'll put a dye lot and a color on it. That is what you see right here, okay? If you notice this one over here, I don't know if you can see that too well, but this is lemon yarn, and then it has lemon in a couple different languages. I don't know what those are because I only speak English, so, but you'll see lemon yarn here, and then right over here, you'll have a dye lot, okay, on this side. You're going to have a dye lot, and even though those dye lots can say that they're the same color, often I find that if I go buy yarn 1 week and then I go back another week or two later, even though I'm buying the one that says that it's lemon and that it's the same dye lot over here, they can actually be a different shade. So if at all possible you want to buy your yarn for your whole project all at the same time, I'm really notorious. My daughter gets after me every time. If it says that it's going to need 1 skein of yarn, I buy 2. If it says 2, I buy 3. Just in case there's any mishaps, or if on occasion I've had the center of a skein, this is what this is called, a skein of yarn. I've had the center have snags or something go wrong with it. I always like to have spares, so I have a ton of yarn doing that. But then I can make scrap things, so it all works out. I keep telling my daughter, but anyway, so that's what we want to look at, is your color and your dye lot. Okay, so again, it's really important, if you can, to buy your yarn all at the same time so you know that all your colors are the same. And if you go back later, you don't end up with a completely different color. Okay, now as I stated, this is the Red Heart Super Saver. As you notice, this is not the soft. What this actually comes off of is this right here. I am in the process of making a blanket, and I've chosen this yellow lemon on here. And so, as you can see, this is just the Red Heart Super Saver yarn. Okay, so we're working on a different label than the brown yarn. What else I wanted to show you on here is it tells you it's Red Heart, it's the Super Saver, and they give you, this will show you a free little pattern that you get inside. So if you look on the inside of the label in there, you can see that that's a pattern for this hat. So you can collect free patterns that way. I tend to go through, and if I see something really cool, then I'll buy that skinny yarn just for this pattern. And my daughter's like, you can get that off YouTube. And I'm just like, okay, we want to contribute here. So I do buy yarn for cute patterns on the front. Okay. The next thing that we want to look at here is we talked about the colors, we talked about the dye lots over here. I need you to look right across here, okay? This will tell you about the yarn. It'll tell you, this one is showing you actually 2 different ways to undo your yarn. Not really important. Most people just pull it from the center. If you notice on here, when you get it, there'll be a center piece of yarn that you'll end up pulling out from here. That's how most of us do it. That way it just comes out and it keeps coming out, and your yarn doesn't get all twisted and you're not having to roll it around. So we'll talk about that later too, because we'll also go through about balling up your yarn, especially when you use pieces of it. But right now we're going to do this, so we're going to kind of skip over the how to pull your yarn out of the skein. It's kind of an obvious thing. Okay, what else we're going to look at here? First, we're going to look at this number here. That first number is what they call the worsted weight, how heavy or how thick the yarn is, okay? You'll learn more about these. I don't really pay attention to that. When I go to the store to buy yarn for a project, I just look and I feel the sizes, and I look at the sizes of my hand, and then that's what I want to go off of when I figured I want to make a project. If I want to make a beanie, do I want it a thick beanie? If so, I buy thicker yarn. If I wanted a thin beanie, I buy thinner yarn. Where this comes in handy is when you mix colors. I tend to try to keep all my patterns that I make using the same yarn. So if I make something out of a Red Heart Super Saver yarn, whether it's yellow, white, green, blue, I always try to buy the same exact yarn for each pattern. So I may buy Red Heart Super Saver in yellow, then I'll buy Red Heart Super Saver in, say, white, Red Heart Super Saver in green, depending on what it is, but I try to make sure it's the same brand. Some people like to be adventurous and make different textures and stuff, but they'll still pay attention here so that they can keep to the worsted weight of the 4 of the yarn, so it's all the same thickness and whatnot here. Now the next thing you're going to see here is the size hook that you need, which corresponds with this. Okay, so on this one right here, this is telling me you're going to have, like it'll say an I9. Okay, so your hook over here will say I, and then it'll have like maybe a 9 on it, or an I-9, and then it'll have also the millimeters that it is, the 4.5 millimeter, 5 millimeter, 6 millimeter. I think they go in ranges from like 4 to 4.25, 4.5, 4.75. You just have to look on your hooks. But this is what your yarn is, and this will tell you what hook they've decided works best with this yarn. So you'll want to look at that. Your next one over here is, it'll show you 2, and they're needles, and they're actually knitting needles. I ventured with knitting, not my favorite. I'm still learning on it, so I just skip over the knitting. But if you need to know, there are sizes for knitting if you knit as well, but we always go with this. I primarily will stick to this, but it really depends on the project that I'm making, because we're going to talk about how to make things larger and how to make things smaller compared to the pattern size. So we'll talk about that more later. The last thing that we're going to talk about is way over here on the end. This is kind of good because this tells you if you can wash it, if you can dry it, you know, if it's, you know, something delicate, if you can iron it, or if you shouldn't iron it. This really comes in handy when you're making, of course, clothes, because you're going to want to wash clothes, but it also comes in really handy for like doilies. If something gets spilled on it, you want to know the way to properly wash this. So the yarn actually has the washing instructions, what you can and cannot do for washing. Right now, I think that's all we're going to need to know about picking yarns. So just when you go to the store and you decide you want to do your first project, just make sure that you pick up your pattern here. You look right here where your hook is and see what size it tells you to pick, and you're going to be spot on with the pattern. Now this also coincides with this pattern here, but when you pick up a crochet pattern, it's going to tell you how many stitches, and if you use this size hook, how large it's going to be and stuff like that. We'll also look at patterns. I don't know if I want to do that right away or if we're going to do that later on, but we are going to go ahead and visit how to read patterns, because people write them different ways, and so that sometimes they're a little bit more complicated to read, but we'll get through this. I may do one, and then you guys can decide when you want to learn how to read a pattern, because I want to get started crocheting. So that's what we're going to do. Probably the next video I have, if I don't do the how to read a pattern video, then we're going to learn how to crochet. That way you guys can get started right away and get your project going. Right now, if you have any questions about different things that you can use, do I like things? I've tried a lot of things out there. I don't own a lot of the stuff that I tried, because I found that it just, wasn't necessary, or, I didn't like the way it functioned. But as we all know, people like to do things different ways. So right now, I think I've covered everything that I use to do crochet with. If you have any questions, let me know, and I hope to see you on our first project, which is going to be on how to start a project and the simplest stitches that we can do to get a project done. It may be a small doily, it may be just a square, but it's going to be something that you can have in a very short time to say, hey, I did this, I can do this, and it's going to be something that you can do over and over to practice with. So I hope to see you on lesson 1. Thank you.